Welcome back, or welcome if you're just joining us. It's the France 24 debate, and we're looking on a day that's fourth day of tension at the Franco-Italian border at how the migrant crisis that is continuing to unfurl here in Europe, but not only in Europe, how it is straining relations within the European Union. We're talking about it with Catherine de Venden, Senior Research Fellow at the French Research Center, the CNRS from Milan, Italy, Claudio Borghi of Italy's Northern League Party, and from London, Gaim Kibraid, who teaches refugee studies at London South Bank University. The Italian Interior Minister calling it all a slap in the face, the fact that the French are stopping those migrants from going across. In a weekend interview with the Italian newspaper Corriere della Sera, Prime Minister Renzi goes further when it comes to EU nations that don't share the burden, rejecting that European Commission plan for others to take in 24,000. He says redistributing just 24,000 people is almost a provocation. If Europe chooses solidarity, good. If it doesn't, we have a plan B ready. But it would first and foremost hurt Europe. He didn't spell out what's in his plan B. What could be in there?
It could be temporary protection, which is providing some small short-term support in order to ask more solidarity from Europe to take care of these people, and for the others, sending them back to their countries if they are just illegal migrants. But the difference between illegal migrants, in some cases, and asylum seekers is very, very thin, so it is very difficult to evaluate.
Claudio Borghi, a plan B that would first and foremost hurt Europe. Those are the words of Matteo Renzi. What do you think he means?
Well, I don't think that they have a bulletproof B plan. I think that it's simply a way to say, well, if ever there is a continuous no from Europe, then we will make up something in order to solve the situation. So probably that's the plan B, because here there are speculations that are obviously not viable. For example, to give to all the migrants a sort of a visa in order to let them go out, but it's I mean it's not something serious. So what we keep on urging the government is to shut the source of the flow of the migrants, because I can fully understand that other countries think about to protect their borders. It's something that we should have done since the beginning. You know, we did this, a very dangerous couple of measures. The first one was to abolish the crime of illegal immigration. This has been done a year ago. And in the meantime, to start the Mare Nostrum operation, that means to bring rescue, into brackets, to any kind of migrant that stays in the Mediterranean.
You mean prevent them from drowning?
So basically, it's like, a neon signal to say,
I'm sorry, but you're saying that we shouldn't prevent them from drowning?
No, but every time there is this word trick. I mean, a different thing is to give assistance to someone that is drowning. Another thing is to locate any kind of boat in the Mediterranean to bring it to Italy.
But right now we're in a situation where the migrants are being pushed out on boats that are being, in some cases, left rudderless, where the smugglers don't even get on the boat.
But you know, they pay for that service. It's probably the most expensive ferry service in the world. They come, there is no one from Libya coming from Italy, so it means that Libyans are doing this kind of ferry service for Africa. So basically what happens is that they pay because they know that there is a result. If ever they know that they are not going nowhere, they stop paying, they stop starting, they stop getting by sea.
Gaim Kibraid,
it's not rocket science. I mean, in 2000...
Let me bring in Gaim.
In 2010, there was only 4,000 migrants arrived in Italy. Because we were at the government and we pushed people back.
Mr. Borghi's logic is outrageous. He is quite heartless. What is he suggesting? Returning people to Libya? Letting them to drown? As long as, let me talk, please. Let me talk. I did not interrupt you when you talked.
With me. I mean, I'm not heartless. I can save more lives in Africa with the very same money in opening, for example, an hospital in Nigeria.
Can I talk?
Can I talk? If we wanted to save lives.
Can I talk? Can I talk, please? Firstly, you're talking a lot about Africa, and is that a coincidence, random occurrence, or you have a reason for that? The large majority coming to Italy are from Syria and not from Africa. And among
it's not
the
true.
Africans
it's not true. We have 2,000 from Syria.
Can I talk, please?
I mean, you can tell lies. If you tell something true, you can talk.
But it is
if not, you will shut me up. You have taken over.
Please.
There is someone presiding over the discussion.
Gaim Kibre, go
At least be civil. Be civil. Let's look at what is happening. What France is doing actually is quite wrong, because the large majority of those people coming to France, they are not coming to stay. They are coming through France to come to Britain, to go to Sweden, to go to Norway, Netherlands, and all those countries. So by closing the French border, it has actually created a dramatic situation which can explode at any time. The situation as it stands requires an urgent solution. The idea of returning people to Libya, especially those who are fleeing in search of protection, does not make sense, and it is even inconsistent with the history and practice of Western governments or the EU countries.
All right,
So I think there is an urgent need for the EU governments to get together, share the burden, and develop a resettlement strategy which would enable the asylum seekers to find home in a place of what they had lost at home, and also to relieve Italy of the burden it is facing. Actually, if you look at the number of people staying in Italy, none of them actually, at least the Eritreans that I know, don't want to stay in Italy. But they prefer it to Libya, otherwise there is
these
no...
negate the theory that is asylum seekers. If someone is not happy to stay in Italy and want to stay in France or in UK, it means that he is an economic migrant.
Why? Why is that?
It is not.
Because if someone is an asylum seeker, then he takes the first shelter that he's able to find. If he wanted to cherry pick, so he said, no, we are not going to stay in Italy. We wanted to go to France. We wanted to go to UK. Then simply saying that reveals the nature of economic migrant. They wanted to go where the better conditions are. So let's all go to Switzerland.
They want to go where, as was explained in part one of the discussion by Catherine de Venden, they want to go where they have roots and a network of friends.
Don't you have any respect for people's rights? Let me talk. Let me talk. If there was an arrangement among EU governments, then there would have been a systematic way of allocating the burden. But because the number has become overwhelming on Italy, these people are rational. They have their relatives elsewhere. Probably they supported or financed their travels. And the first thing they want to do is to have a future. they don't see any future in Italy because the burden in Italy has become too much.
Has become too high. And by the way, it's not just Italy where there's a problem. There's also Greece here in Europe, but it's all over the globe this year. 2015, we're faced with the biggest uprooting of people since World War II. Josh Vardy has the story.
They fled their homes to escape war, persecution, poverty, or the ravages of nature. It's estimated that 51 million people are currently displaced across the world. Around 18 million of those are looking for refuge in other countries, with many heading for Europe. Wars in Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan and Somalia have forced around 15 million people from their homes. Refugee camps in places like Turkey or Jordan are overflowing. These are places where there is no work, nor the promise of a future, so many decide to risk their lives getting to Europe. Economic refugees are mostly from sub-Saharan Africa. They're the most difficult to count due to journeys that can take several years. Most know that their demand for asylum can be rejected if they use illegal means to travel, but many argue that taking this risk is still better than returning home. Then there are those forced to leave their countries due to persecution of their ethnicity or their religion, like the Yazidis and Christians in Iraq, or the Rohingya Muslims from Burma. Asia is also confronted with most of the world's climate refugees, those running from natural disaster, a growing problem in the 21st century. Around 30 million a year are displaced due to natural disaster, a figure that could rise to 200 million a year if the fight against climate change proves ineffective.
Catherine de Venden, in light of all of that happening around the globe, it's in some cases it's political problems, in some cases it's economic poverty, in some cases it's climate change. What are you expecting from politicians out of when they meet in Luxembourg, these interior ministers on Tuesday?
I think that politicians should stress on solidarity, because this idea to burden sharing was launched first by Germany. Germany received 75% of all asylum seekers after the fall of the Berlin Wall. So they were asking for burden sharing, like Austria. And now the burden sharing is mostly taken by Italy and Greece, because it is the proximity of the south rim of the Mediterranean, but the other European countries are refusing solidarity for political reasons. They want to assert their sovereignty on their territory for electoral reasons mostly, and so Italy says we don't stamp the passports, and we consider they can cross the border, and the reaction of France was we will close the borders, and so it will create a crisis for these people, and unrespectful of the principles of solidarity inside Europe, and unrespectful of the Geneva Convention on Refugees.
And while Europe argues over the migrant crisis, there's a political crisis that's brewing in Australia over this. Australia, which touted zero tolerance when it comes to migrant boats. The foreign minister, you'll recall, even offered to share her expertise with Europeans. Well, now, Tony Abbott's government accused of bribery by Indonesia's vice president. This amid allegations the captain and 5 crew of a boat carrying migrants from Bangladesh, Burma, and Sri Lanka were each paid $5,000 by an Australian immigration official. The boat now anchored at Indonesia's Rote Island.
The very consistent position of this government has been not to comment on operational details. The consistent position of this government has been not to comment on the operational details of what
There'll be silence on
is
my
necessary
left.
and what has been done to stop the boat.
The Prime Minister says he's got a mandate to stop the boats. Well, he doesn't have a mandate to break the law, and he doesn't have a mandate for handing out big wads of cash out on the ocean.
Gaim Kibraid, your thoughts about this controversy that's brewing in Australia and Indonesia?
Yes, it is when a state engages in such illegal activities, it is actually engaging in human smuggling. Smugglers get paid to provide services to take people to another country illegally, And that's exactly, if it has happened truly, then that is exactly what the Australian government has been engaging into. And if this proves to be true, then it will damage, its reputation is actually almost very low, and it can't sink lower. But it was beyond anybody's imagination that a government would pay the traffickers or the crew to take them elsewhere. It's exactly identical as what traffickers do. So it is in desperation. Australia is not desperate because the number of people it's receiving are not many. So if Europe is trying to emulate the experience of Australia, that would be very, very sad. And I hope it doesn't happen.
Claudio Borghi.
But if you want me to comment on solutions to the Mediterranean crisis, there isn't a single solution. And there is no easy solution either. The solution has to be multidimensional and should occur in the places of origin. In countries where there is poverty, there has to be a concerted action to provide development aid. In the countries where there are brutal dictators, the international community should bring pressure to bear to bring about or to effect political change so that those who are away would return home and those who are at home would not find it necessary to flee. And also the international community, especially the EU, should assist the neighboring countries that are bearing the lion's share of the burden, like Lebanon, Jordan, and in Africa, Sudan, Ethiopia, and others. If the refugees in those countries could be assisted and to develop a meaningful life, then one can reduce it. But more importantly, one needs to seek political solution in the country where there is oppression and persecution. So the solutions have to target three areas: neighboring countries, countries of origin, and also in Europe, discriminating between migrants and asylum seekers.
And asylum seekers.
And the migrants should be assisted to return home safely. So in transit countries, country of origin, EU countries, and those are, I think, the solutions that can bring about change.
Claudio Borghi, again, it brings us back to the question of with Libya being the launch pad these days. What do you do? Since right now there are dueling governments, they're trying to have a peace process, but it's not going so far right now. And you even have jihadists in the mix. What does Europe do about Libya?
It is very complicated. Anyway, whose fault is Libya?
Let me bring in Claudio Borghi
the
on
state
this.
Libya
Let me ask Claudio Borghi, please.
It was France and Britain that are responsible for overthrowing Gaddafi. I'm not saying Gaddafi was a good ruler. He was a tyrant. But can anyone tell me now that Libya is better off now than it was under Gaddafi?
All right, but let's look ahead now. Let me ask Claudio Borghi about this.
Something without having a proper replacement. Look at Iraq. Look at Libya. Right. So Europe is not. The West is not free from responsibility.
Claudio Borghi, what do we do about Libya now? We know about the past mistakes. What do we do in the future?
Well, I know that it's not easy. I mean, simply drawing an easy solution is not the right way to think about it. We have, of course, to work overseas and to find to make for example, camp of first aid there, to build a hospital there. But in the meanwhile, we need to give signal that the wave must stop. It's not being heartless. It's simply that in the history of the world, every kind of uncontrolled migration brings doom for the people that
but with Libya today, being lawless,
since the Roman Empire.
But with Libya today being lawless, it is the weakest link by which people will go. So what does Europe do about that?
So this is
let me ask Claudio Borghi.
You have to fix. Yeah, you have to fix the numbers that are able to be hosted in another country, and this has been sorted out by visas and every kind of regular stuff. If not, if we thin the line between the asylum seekers and the migrants in such a way that is impossible to sort out who they are.
But you still haven't answered the question. What about Libya? What do you do about Libya today? That's the question.
Sorry?
Claudio Borghi, what do you do about Libya?
About Libya, there are two governments. Let's say one in Tripolitania and one in Cyrenaica. But they are. It's a mess over there. But it's possible to do agreement with both of them. It's very possible. If it's possible to do agreement only with one part of the country in which the country is split, then we should focus on that and stop every kind of people coming from the irregular other part. So once we have to arrive in a situation in which Libya should become like Morocco. Why people doesn't come from Morocco to Spain into Europe in waves? It's the more logical place to do, because they are the closest, the Gibraltar Strait, the border. Instead they are not coming from there because there are functioning border relationships. We have to bring back this functioning border relationship first and foremost.
All right, we're going to unfortunately have to leave it. Gaim Kibraid, unfortunately we're running out of time.
Can I say a word?
Very quickly.
Okay, Mr. Borghi's sole preoccupation is to stop the migrants from coming to Europe. He doesn't care about what happens in transit countries, in the Mediterranean Sea, in their countries of origin. He has an oversimplistic solution to this complex problem. He needs to wake up and realize that stopping people from coming to Europe is not easy, and it will not solve anything, and the consequences would be dangerous.
I'm fully awake, but I cannot solve the problem of the old world. There are people dying of poverty all over the world. If you care about the number of the people that you can save, then so we can make a count whether we are helping more people doing this, or in stopping people doing this so they don't drown into the sea.
Have to leave it there, unfortunately,
because the money that we use to do this kind of
we're going to have to leave it there. We're out of time. Claudio Borghi, I want to thank Gaim Kibraib, Claudio Borghi in Milan, Gaim Kibraib for being with us from London. I also want to thank Catherine de Venden for being with us here in our studios. Stay with us. Our Media Watch segment is next. All right, and we're joined by James Creedon. Stay with us, Catherine. It's our Media Watch segment here. James, as you can see, a heated discussion over this.
Indeed, and if you're to take a look online, Francois, you can, I suppose, divide some of the reaction down the middle between humanitarian and political. And so to take a look at some of the images coming up online, we are not going back. Open the way. You have a lot of photos such as of those ones coming up. BusinessInsider.com focusing on the hunger strike at the Franco-Italian border. For Les Inrecuptibles, it is simply a humanitarian crisis. And for the Mirror in the UK, they very much focus as well on the humanitarian aspect of this, with the images of those migrants on the beach or the shore in Ventimiglia. And the headline of that article is "Shocking Pictures Show Migrants Protecting Themselves with Emergency Blankets." So they're focusing on the Red Cross effort to support those migrants. Also online, videos being uploaded talking with refugees welcome. No one is illegal, says that video. And a similar message coming from this Twitter user calling what is happening in Ventimiglia simply inhuman. And there's a report as well from a digital magazine in Italy, Q Code Mag, where the journalist Gabriella Ballerini walks along amongst the migrants and speaks about nude shadows washing themselves with salt water, and one man looking towards the sea trying to find a foothold. So she's very much focusing on, I suppose, the human aspect of the story.
And the contrast is there because this is the Italian Riviera, after all.
Absolutely, indeed. And certainly she was shocked by the scenes that she saw in Ventimiglia, François. So that's one aspect. And then I suppose the political side of it, you can see even with slogans such as this, Liberté, Égalité, Fraternité, the French slogan, people, I suppose, pointing out the I suppose, contradiction in some senses between the notion of fraternity, which is universal, and the fact that this is happening on a French border with Italy, within, you know, supposedly open European borders, except that's not the case, of course, for asylum seekers. Well, we're waiting for a response, political response from Europe, and that's one of the images I think that has been most shared, François. A humanitarian crisis, or we are waiting for a political response from Europe.
All right, so a lot of outrage on social networks on that. Many thanks, James Creedon.
Thank you.
Many thanks to our panelists for being with us. Thank you for joining us here in the France 24 debate.